Our time is right now. I'm Carolina Coral here in the studio. Welcome, Freedom Viewers. Let's get straight to the important news. Russian occupiers have once again attacked Ukraine's railway infrastructure. This was reported by Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Kuleba. According to him, in the morning in the Mykolaiv region, a Russian drone struck an empty train that had arrived for maintenance. As a result of the attack, one Ukrzaliznytsia employee was injured. The day before, Russian forces also tried to attack a Dnipro-Kovel passenger train with a drone. Railway workers stopped the train and evacuated the passengers. The attack drone exploded just a few meters from the locomotive. No one was injured. One person was killed and 5 more were wounded as a result of Russian shelling in the Donetsk region. This was reported by the National Police of Ukraine. 8 settlements came under enemy fire. Among them are Dobropilya, Kostyantinivka, Kramatorsk, Mykolaiv, and Slavyansk. The Russians used heavy artillery and attack drones against residential areas and civilian infrastructure, and also dropped guided aerial bombs. 76 buildings are destroyed, 65 of which were residential houses. Over the past day, Russian forces shelled 30 settlements in the Sumy region. 1 person was killed and another was wounded. The shelling also damaged residential houses, warehouses, and vehicles. Investigation teams and bomb disposal experts worked at the sites, even despite the threat of repeated strikes. In 5 regions of Ukraine, some consumers were left without electricity due to Russian attacks on the energy sector. And as reported by Ukrenergo, outages have been recorded in the Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Kherson regions. Where the security situation allows, restoration work is already underway. In several regions, there are power restrictions for industry and scheduled hourly outages for other consumers. In the Kharkiv region, additional emergency outages have been introduced. At the same time, the Russian army is changing its tactics for massive strikes on Ukraine. Now, the main target of the enemy is the water infrastructure of major cities. According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, these changes indicate the failure of Russia's winter energy terror campaign. However, experts emphasize that the Kremlin will use the experience from these attacks for future strikes on Ukraine's water supply. On the night of March 4th, Russian forces launched 149 attack drones at Ukraine from 5 directions. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, about 100 of them were Shaheds. The attack was repelled by the Ukrainian Air Force, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare units, drone systems, and mobile fire groups. Air Defense Forces shot down or neutralized 129 drones in the north, south, and east of the country. 19 drones hit 15 locations, and debris fell in 1 other area. The Security Service of Ukraine and the Prosecutor General's office have charged Russian Major General Sergei Kuvaldin in absentia for the missile strike on the Akhmedit Children's Hospital in Kiev. The investigation determined that on July 8, 2024, it was he who gave the order for the attack. As a result of the KH-101 cruise missile strike, 2 people were killed and dozens more were injured. The hospital building and high-tech medical equipment were also damaged. Over the past day, Russian occupiers attempted to break through Ukraine's state border in the Kharkiv region. The Russians attacked the positions of Ukrainian troops in the areas of Zabino and Krugli. However, as reported by the press service of the Joint Forces Group, the enemy did not succeed. Ukrainian units managed to stop the invaders' assault groups. In total, over the past day, the Defense Forces repelled 17 attacks in the southern Slobozhansky direction. In the Kupiansk sector, the Russian army unsuccessfully tried to advance in the areas of 3 settlements. The Ukrainian armed forces regained control over more territory than the Russian troops had captured. This was reported by the Institute for the Study of War. They confirmed the deoccupation of more than 250 square kilometers and admit that the real numbers are even higher. Analysts pointed out that there was a turning point in the war in February. Since the beginning of 2026, the Ukrainian armed forces have regained control over 460 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This was previously stated by Volodymyr Zelensky, and according to experts, these successes will force the Kremlin to adjust its plans. The last time Ukrainian forces liberated more territory than they lost was during the summer counteroffensive of 2023. 144 combat clashes were recorded on the front line over the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The most intense situation is in the Hulyapol and Pokrovsk directions. In each of these areas, Russian forces attacked the positions of Ukrainian defenders 25 times. On the Konstantinivka section of the front, the enemy carried out 17 assaults. In the Oleksandrivka area, the Russian army made 11 attempts to advance. 980 Russian soldiers were eliminated by Ukrainian defense forces over the past day. The total losses of the Russian army have already exceeded 1,269,000 troops. The Ukrainian armed forces also destroyed 32 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launch systems, 4 armored combat vehicles, 5 tanks, as well as 232 units of motor vehicles and enemy fuel trucks. The Russian army in Ukraine is showing the slowest rate of advance among major military campaigns of the past century. This is stated in an analytical report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. According to experts, since the beginning of 2024, the average speed of Russian forces advancing in key directions has ranged from 15 to 70 meters per day. Putin threatened to capture the entire territory of Donetsk region, literally by the end of 2025. Why, in early March 2026, is he just as far from this goal as he was 6 months ago? My colleague Victoria Chistuhina looked into it.
It will take Russia about 1.5 years to fully occupy the Donetsk region, said Pavlo Palisa, deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine and brigadier general. This will cost Moscow enormous resources, both material and human. In 2025, the aggressor country managed to capture less than 1% of Ukraine's territory. At the same time, the Russian command lost more than 450,000 soldiers killed and wounded over the course of the year.
They haven't given up on capturing Donetsk region. They are still planning to create a buffer zone in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. They hope to advance as far as possible in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions and create conditions that would allow them to claim Zaporizhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. As of now, I honestly don't see any real opportunities for the Russians to achieve these plans in the next 6 months. Pavel Palisa, deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, in an interview with the Radio Liberty television project, Donbass Realities.
Analysts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies have noted that the pace of the Russian army's advance in Ukraine is the slowest seen in more than a century of modern warfare history. The offensive on Chasiv Yar, which began in February 2024, advanced at a rate of just 15 meters per day. In less than 2 years, the Russian army covered only 10 kilometers and was still unable to fully take control of a city. Notably, the intensity of the assault by the occupiers has not decreased. Experts say this indicates that the occupying forces are exhausted and the quality of their resources is declining.
The Russians are focusing more on attacking Ukrainian logistics and regrouping. This is obvious because, first, they're preparing for a larger offensive, and second, they've run into their own logistical and management problems since they lost access to Starlink. They need some time to prepare, although it's unlikely they'll be able to fully make up for the lack of this technology. Viktor Tregobov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, speaking live on the United News Marathon.
The Ukrainian army has broken through Russian defenses in the Oleksandrivka direction, according to the command of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces. During the combat operation, Ukrainian scouts destroyed the occupiers' firing positions, eliminated enemy personnel, and struck ammunition storage sites. As a result, they managed to disrupt the enemy's plans to advance toward the administrative border of Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions and opened up a foothold for Ukrainian forces.
The enemy was unable to either build up their resources or, even more so, generate the main strike forces needed to carry out this strategic offensive plan. There have been no systematic advances, except, as we note, some villages and settlements have already been destroyed.
The situation remains difficult in the Pokrovsko-Myrnograd agglomeration area, according to the command of the East Military Group. Russian commanders are bringing in additional reserves and increasing the intensity of airstrikes. The enemy is using infiltration tactics with small infantry groups, employing ATVs and other equipment. Defense force units continue to hold back the Russian invaders. The aggressor is suffering significant losses in this sector of the front. Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine have already exceeded 1,267,000 soldiers. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, yesterday the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 3 armored combat vehicles, 74 artillery systems, 3 multiple rocket launchers, 5 air defense systems, and 247 units of enemy automotive equipment.
They delivered an incredibly powerful strike at the enemy's reserves, and that's why the losses, up to 1,000 people daily from various enemy units, clearly demonstrate the fact that, essentially, the Russian army's reserves are not being replenished. Over the course of approximately 1 month, they were able to mobilize up to 28,000 people. We destroyed about 30 to 35,000 every month.
Operators of unmanned systems forces struck the air defense assets of the aggressor country's army. Fighters from the 1st Separate UAV Center delivered precise strikes on a radar station and a launcher of the S-300 surface-to-air missile system near Mariupol, which is temporarily occupied by Russia. This significantly reduced the enemy's ability to control the airspace, and also made it harder to detect targets and guide missiles. Victoria Chistyukina for Freedom TV channel.
The United States destroyed 17 Iranian ships, including a submarine, as part of a large-scale operation. 50,000 military personnel, 200 fighter jets, 2 aircraft carriers, and bombers took part in it. More than 2,000 munitions were used, and nearly 2,000 targets were struck. In response, Iran launched more than 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones. They targeted civilian facilities. According to U.S. Central Command Chief Brian Cooper, Iran's ability to attack U.S. forces has been weakened, and the operation is progressing faster than planned. In turn, Israel announced a strike on an Iranian facility that was linked to a nuclear weapons program. Authorities reported that the facility was allegedly used to develop capabilities necessary for obtaining nuclear weapons. A group of Iranian specialists was secretly developing technologies needed to produce nuclear warheads. In June of last year, the Iranian regime moved weapons development into underground storage facilities. The IDF noted that Israeli intelligence had been tracking the movements of Iranian nuclear scientists, which made it possible to pinpoint their new workplace and deliver a devastating strike on the facility. Poland is in talks with France about participating in the nuclear deterrence program. This was announced by the country's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk. According to him, Warsaw has already received an invitation from Paris to cooperate. Tusk noted that Poland is investing in future nuclear power plants and will not be passive when it comes to nuclear security. At the same time, the Polish authorities intend to cooperate with other participants in the project, particularly Sweden and Denmark. Let me also remind you that the day before, Denmark and France had already signed an agreement on strategic nuclear deterrence. According to Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, deepening contacts will strengthen Europe's capabilities in the face of threats from Russia. Belgium has set bail at 10 million euros for the Russian Shadow Fleet tanker that was arrested on Sunday. And according to the H&L publication, the vessel is under sanctions from both the EU and the UK. The inspection revealed 45 violations, mostly due to fake certificates and the fact that the tanker was sailing under a false Ghanaian flag. After the bail is paid, the documents are checked, and the Russian flag is obtained, the vessel will be able to set sail again. To do this, the crew of 21 people will remain on board the entire time. And Belgium's defense minister, Theo Franken, stated that the operation is aimed at enforcing EU sanctions, protecting the North Sea, and limiting the financing of Russia's war against Ukraine. The surge in global oil prices to a record high since July 2024, following U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, did not help Russia cover its budget deficit. This is according to calculations by Reuters. And according to analysts, nearly a quarter of Russia's revenue comes from oil and gas. At the same time, Russian oil is being sold at prices lower than the global market. This is due to Western sanctions, with the EU capping prices at $44.10 per barrel since February 1st. The Kremlin's massive spending on the war against Ukraine has nearly depleted Russia's state treasury, according to experts. And prominent economists are now warning that Russia's budget deficit could increase by nearly 3 times by the end of 2026. Now, let's discuss the next topic in more detail. Ukraine must preserve its territory, which is why it's necessary to end the war started by the Kremlin. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated this during a joint briefing at the White House before his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Merz added that the topic of Russia's war against Ukraine, ways to end it, as well as guarantees of territorial integrity and respect for interests, remain central in his dialogue with Trump. After meeting with the U.S. president, the German chancellor shared details of their conversation. And in particular, according to Merz, he urged Donald Trump to increase pressure on Vladimir Putin, since both leaders recognize the need to end Russia's war against Ukraine as soon as possible. The German chancellor expressed doubt about Putin's willingness to stop the fighting and believes that Russia is stalling for time and therefore acting against the wishes of the American president. Only when Washington starts putting pressure on Russia again will Putin be ready to make concessions. That's Merz's opinion.
During today's talks, I advocated for increasing pressure on Moscow. After 4 years of war, Russia's economy has been noticeably weakened, and the Russian army has suffered serious losses. Today, the Russian giant is standing on clay feet. That's exactly why we want to find a solution here. But most importantly, one in which Europeans are involved. We are not ready to accept an agreement signed without our participation, and I am departing from Washington with a strong sense that the U.S. administration fully and deeply comprehends what is at stake in Ukraine, and that the nation of Ukraine cannot simply make territorial concessions.
During negotiations with Donald Trump, the German chancellor chose a strategy of private diplomacy. According to Politico, as one of his arguments, Friedrich Merz showed President Trump maps of the front line and maps of Ukraine's access to the Black Sea. And according to the German chancellor, he got the impression that now the U.S. president understands the situation better and what is at stake for Ukraine. Moreover, this is the firm position of the Europeans, Friedrich Merz stated following the negotiations with Donald Trump. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen held talks yesterday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The key topics were the EU's bloc decision on a €90 billion loan for Ukraine and the 20th package of sanctions against Russia. This was reported by the European Commission's press service. Ursula von der Leyen herself wrote on social media platform X that she and President Zelensky also discussed energy prices, energy security, and what is currently needed for Ukraine's defense. In addition, Brussels confirmed that 6 clusters in the negotiations between Ukraine and the European Union on EU accession are ready to be opened. Earlier, this was already announced by Volodymyr Zelensky, and now it has been confirmed by European Commission spokesperson Marcus Lamard.
The Commission remains firmly committed to advancing Ukraine's accession to the European Union and supporting the swift implementation of key reforms. Despite Russia's ongoing aggressive war, Ukraine also remains firmly committed to its path toward EU membership, having successfully completed the screening process and made progress on key reforms. This is very clearly and explicitly outlined in our most recently published enlargement report. That is why we welcome the completion of the bilateral screening in record time and would like to once again reiterate the Commission's assessment that all 6 clusters are now ready to be opened. Now the decision is in the hands of the member states. We are fully prepared to provide support to Ukraine on its path to the EU.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.